Welcome to Back in the Box, your weekly dose of discussions and stories shared about how we felt we were kept in certain boxes in our lives by society and close family members who expected us to sit in a box and stay in it. In our podcast, we aim to lift the lid on all the times we try to break out of the boxes.
I'm Em,
And I'm Z.
and we're both British South Asian women and are lifting the lid on all of our personal experiences and doing so as two friends having a light-hearted conversation. And through healing, we're now in a position to be able to talk openly and vulnerably in the hope that you may also be able to resonate with our experiences. Okay, so we'll start, and a bit of an advisory comment at the start, as this is quite a serious podcast that we've done, isn't it, Z? And that this podcast may contain themes of domestic abuse, which can be triggering and may be triggering or distressing to some viewers and listeners. So please do use your discretion and always make sure that you take care of yourself. And if you are facing any form of abuse, useful links and contacts are provided below. So today we're going to be discussing relationships within our marriage, the husband, the in-laws, and also our family members and what impact they had on both of us.
This is an interesting one, as I feel it unravels so much of our journey and what we've had to endure, our resilience and strength. Okay, let's start with husbands. So for me, my husband was absolutely golden. Can't actually say anything negative in regards to how he was with me. I think the more the accountability I have taken more myself. Remember it in the last podcast when I talked about love and marriage, my parents, particularly my mum and my family, weren't really accepting of our marriage or our relationship. So for me, I was set out to prove them wrong. So I started then placing expectations on myself because I wanted their kind of affirmation and their acceptance that I did the right thing and still wanted to belong in that family, regardless of how they felt. So with that, I started getting controlling with my husband, exuding controlling behaviors, getting quite obsessive with him, and more or less putting him in a box with a padlock, which I could only open. So examples of that, I would never let him go out without me constantly texting, getting him to prove where he was. That would go on for quite a while. I would do that all the time. He would actually go out. And looking back, I probably was a little deranged. I probably not a little psychotic because I was getting twisted with my own thoughts because of the fear that was instilled in me, because I just wanted to create this perfect relationship. That controlling behavior reminded me of my dad and how he was quite controlling to my mum. And remember, I tried to break free of that culture. Controlling and intimidation was something that I just did not want to do. So I did actually clock when I was doing it. It was quite a few years of me doing it, if I'm completely honest with you. I did actually seek therapy to actually understand why I was so controlling. Because you remember, if a man was doing that to me, sending me text messages, wanting to know where I was, wouldn't let me out, it'd be abusive. You know, there's no difference. And there should be no bias on gender. For me, I recognized that it was emotional abuse.
Thank you for sharing that. That's so courageous and vulnerable of you to admit that something such as being controlling and abusive was happening. And the fact that you recognize the past patterns, linked to your dad shows that you were really reflective of yourself and you were able to make the changes in your behavior and mindset for the good of your marriage.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes you've got to take accountability of your own actions. It's okay to kind of blame others to how you are, but it's a hard pill to swallow to admit that you're in the wrong and to take that reflection. This is on me and I need to sort it out. So when the penny dropped, I knew I had to change. As any type of abuse, regardless of how small it is, it has an impact. And even if the other person isn't complaining, it's still abuse.
We tend to hear more of what most people consider abuse, which is physical abuse, rather than the emotional abuse, which is unseen abuse sometimes, isn't it? It doesn't appear on the outside.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm also recognizing that maybe I was abusing myself in a way.
Yeah.
If I look at it from a different lens, So I was put myself through those thoughts and actions. I was kind of hurting myself because of the expectations and those high expectations I was placing. He did call out my faults. Well, I was quick to call out his faults because I wanted him to change, but he never wanted me to change. I think sometimes you need to recognize that I was abusing myself and take reflection. What are you doing to yourself? Because I was placing so much expectations on myself. Whereas his traits was coming from a caring perspective where he didn't call out any of my faults. He never wanted to change me. That's unconditional love.
That's so sweet. He sounds such a beautiful person.
Yeah, he was. I just wasn't. We're just the yin and the yang. Yeah, I was a nice person, but I was driven by this obsessiveness to show everybody and show my family that I had this perfect marriage and this perfect life and that we were good people.
Yeah, it sounds like you'd actually put yourself in a box, of what your expectations were there.
Yeah, 100%. And I put myself in a very tight box. And it's crazy how you create boxes for yourself through your own thoughts just to prove others wrong, not because like how you are as a couple, but just perception. And it goes back to that perception, which I tried to run away from.
Yeah.
But it was there the whole time. So yeah, so through counselling, it was evident that I didn't really believe that unconditional love was real. It took me a while to accept that I had unconditional love. And I think once I kind of settled with it, I accepted it, that's when my behaviour changed towards him and more so towards myself.
I'm wondering why you find it hard to accept unconditional love. Was it unconditional in your childhood?
I came from a secure family, that I was fed, I had shelter. So I had my basic needs met. So that could be classed as unconditional love. But I didn't have the support. I didn't actually have any love that was actually given or shown in that regards. So because I didn't actually have that support, even when I was growing up as a child, I came out of culture and that was pretty tough.
I can imagine.
Yeah, but I still wanted to blog and I kept returning to my family, even with those negative thoughts.
Yeah. So what did therapy help you to do?
So I think therapy allowed me to actually look at myself in terms of actually understanding, where I was placed in the family, basically, where those expectations came from. It allowed me to stop thinking about others, stop blaming others, because I think it was quite quick to say, okay, well, this is the reason why I'm being controlled. This is the way I'm behaving because of how my family are or because of how they are towards me. And I'm getting all this kind of hate and I have a right to be the way I am. I think it allowed me to look internally, think about, how do I accept myself and accept the actions that I'm taking and ignore what everybody else is doing, moving forward with myself and my own thoughts.
Yeah, that's really powerful that you're able to acknowledge your own part. And it's so easy, isn't it, to look outside externally from ourselves and blame everyone else rather than look inside ourselves and think about how we're thinking about things and our actions, and also reflecting in a more rational way about other people's reactions, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's quite easy. And I did it all the time. I used to take the bait all the time. I would take every single bait that someone gave me and I would retaliate. I just stopped doing it. You ignore all the noise, basically. So, that was my experience in terms of me being a bit of a control freak, a bit psychotic, and really accept myself. But how was it for you, Emma? What's your experience of your hubby?
Oh, very different, I would say. So let me just set some context. Like we spoke about last time, I had an arranged introduction and a marriage. That was really done by my parents, and the whole village attended. And first noticed a change in the husband on our honeymoon, where I saw a real lack of empathy, respect, and quite demeaning comments and silent treatment, which I'd never really experienced before in a partnership. And I really thought in my head that that was a one-off incident. and that it wouldn't happen again. And also, I think I was thinking, well, can't leave after being married so soon. I'm literally on my honeymoon. And I had this sort of mindset, I will do this, I am going to do it. And, really wanted it to work. And on reflection, I ended up lowering my boundaries and accepting a lot more than I should have done. I gave more of myself to make it work and justify why he was the way he was due to his traumas. I justified it in my own head. And I ended up tolerating a lot of unacceptable behavior and tried to sort of like appease him. And interestingly, the more unkind and controlling he became, the more I gave, the more verbally, physically, and emotionally abusive he became. He was always out with his friends, getting drunk, coming home, falling over the place, and getting annoyed that I was annoyed with how he was behaving, sort of turning it around on me. That unpredictable behavior was really scary. It made me feel really unsafe. And I felt like I was living on eggshells and not really sure of what to expect each time he came home after drinking. And this had like a physical effect on me. I didn't sleep very well. I used to get loads of migraines. And I became more in tune and hypervigilant of his moods and behaviors, tiptoeing around thinking that I don't want to say anything that will lead to a confrontation or an argument. Is this worth arguing about? There was many a time that I couldn't help myself because I was so hurt and I felt unwanted, unloved, disrespected and ignored. And that's when the whole abusive cycle would happen again.
That must be so hard, not to actually vocalize how you felt, like being trapped again. But to me, in a way, worse because you had no voice.
In a way, I internalized all of this and I sort of thought I deserved being treated badly. I didn't think I was good enough in myself to be due that level of respect, that inner child who, when I was younger, had always been told that you're a bad person, you do bad things, you're the one that causes all the problems, you're gob. And subconsciously, I must have thought that it wasn't any more than what I deserved. And I realised later, consciously, that I didn't love myself enough or respect myself enough to set those high boundaries to protect myself. I did have a voice, but I didn't always choose to vocalise because I was scared, I was in fear, and I was confused. I feel like I lived in a fog or a haze a lot of the time during that marriage. There was a pattern with a roller coaster of emotions. It was always up, down, and there would be flying, unpredictable rages. And if I challenge anything, I'd get silent treatment, which could last anything up to 2-3 weeks. He'd then ignore me. He'd go out with his friends. He would eyeball me, a bit like my dad used to do. And if any point I confronted that behavior, he didn't address any of the issues. And looking back now, he clearly gaslit me and manipulated with his words into making me think and feel that it was my fault. His behavior was my fault. And he used to say things like I was oversensitive, it was all in my head, nothing he did was good enough. He would also say, like, who do you think you are, the Queen or something? You think you're better than me? All of those sort of comments. And again, that just confirmed my internal voice that I was not good enough and a bad person. And I shouldn't be thinking I deserve any better treatment. But what he was actually doing was trying to avoid me voicing or tackling any of his bad behavior. And that would be followed by periods of being really super nice, attentive, loving, a lot of physical sort of making up, which made me think, oh, thank goodness he's back to normal. This is a person.
He would just flip, just like that, basically.
Yeah, when I started to actually not then reach out and chase him, I guess, to make up, he would then think, oh, she's not reacting. Oh, I better now step forward and be nice to her. So she then starts to talk to me or show affection. And it was just physical affection, really. And yeah, it was a bit like he was using a carrot and a stick. So first, like it would be the abuse, and then it would be showing a nice, loving, physically loving side when he'd taken me to breaking point. And then that lured me into this false sense of hope. And then the cycle would just start again. I actually thought the person he was when he was being loving or kind, and I say loving only in the physical sense and not emotionally, and
Yeah.
I thought that was the real persona. But the reality was the abusive person was the real person. The nice person was a mask. And I look back now, again, like I said, I was thinking it's me, but he lacked in his own self-worth and put me down to feel better about himself. And that controlling behavior was so he would feel more important. And the lack of accountability for his bad behavior and not allowing me to raise any issues, that was him doing that to gaslight and manipulate the way that I thought about things and blame myself.
Yeah, I mean, that's just crazy in regards, like, how he would flick like that. The thought of you going through that as well, it's a lot, basically.
Yeah. Yeah,
It really is.
I didn't know whether I was coming or going, and absolutely it's crazy making. Don't get me wrong, I did call the police a number of occasions and had things recorded in my medical records. And then, because I did that quite often, the physical abuse stopped. However, then it became more insidious, underhand and manipulative. And it was full on emotional abuse and gaslighting to a whole new level.
Yeah, and that wasn't even worse than the physical because it's invisible, so people don't really see it. I have no experience, but what are your thoughts on that, Em?
Yeah, in my personal experience, it's just as damaging, if not more, when it's invisible. And this abuse is also hidden by the abuser and the abused. It affects the abused person's mindset through, it affects how you think about yourself, your thoughts and feelings, going crazy. I'd lost all sense of myself and who I was. I felt weak. I felt I was living in survival mode all the time, living in fear, hoping that the nice person would reappear. And I lived on that false hope, giving him more, and the more he took. And yeah, really lowering my boundaries and accepting very, very poor treatment and behavior. And, I'm sure many people might be thinking when they hear this, why didn't she just get out? And remember, I'd been told so many times that I was a problem. I was the one in the wrong. I'd actually started to believe it in myself. I felt weak. And I just tried harder to prove that I was a good person by sacrificing more of myself, my boundaries and my worth. And, like I said, living in survival mode, most of the time I was just trying to get through each day, each hour, and couldn't think beyond that. And I didn't even tell my family and friends, as I thought, what can they do? And yeah, I think a part of me was, I don't know if I can leave. I was scared to leave.
Do you think it became like a self-fulfilling prophecy? Because obviously you had the thoughts of not feeling good enough as a child and then him not making you feel good enough.
Yeah.
Do you feel that, maybe you sort of felt you normalized it and this was just a normal part of living?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I can honestly say I didn't even notice some of the changes. And I know some people might think, oh, how can you not notice these things happening? But it's like it slowly ramps up. So I would compare it to that analogy, where I was the frog slowly being boiled in the frying pan, or like when mums go into labour and you start off with a small bit of pain and it ramps up and you don't actually realise how bad the pain is in the end, but you get through it. You actually become normalised and accustomed to that level that you're living at.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was too busy surviving, bringing up my children, trying to give them a happy life, trying to earn a living. But I felt the most unloved, hated even, not valued or respected just as a human being, let alone as a partner. And I tried so hard to please and appease to keep the peace and to make it okay for my children. And making them happy made me happy. I tried to make things work, thinking I was the one causing his reactions. Remember, this is part of the gaslighting and manipulation. But it was all one-sided effort and no compromises, no understanding of my feelings or my opinions or, even asking what I wanted. I felt the most alone in a marriage than being on my own. Everybody thinks, you've got a partner, you're going home. Oh, it must be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And outside, I pretended everything was okay. It was like a release and a relief not to have to think about it when other people were around me. And to the world, we appeared to be a happy couple. But behind closed doors, he dropped his mask as soon as he entered the house. And it was so clearly evident. And he was the most miserable, unkind person. And I didn't know if I was going to be met by the monster or the happy-go-lucky person.
Yeah. I mean, I think, Em, you got to recognise the fact that you mentioned you were at the weakest at that point. I feel you were getting stronger. To me, looking outside in, that you were getting stronger each time mentally. Takes a lot of strength to keep pushing through, doesn't it?
Yeah, that is part of who I am, that I will never have to say that people in abusive relationships normally attempt to leave and fail at least 2 or 3 times and can be many, many more. And I left him twice throughout that marriage before I left him for good. He begged and said he would go to marriage counselling the once. And yeah, things were okay for a while afterwards. And then the behaviour started to creep back in again. That drinking started up and more verbal abuse and emotional abuse started up again. And then I remember I left again. And again, he proved he was able to, I thought, change his behaviour. And this time we were separated for nearly 9 months. And this time there wasn't as much swearing, but slowly the put downs and dropping the mask to be his angry, uncommunicative self started to seep in again. And I was justifying, oh, actually, he's not swearing, so that's okay. Oh, he's not doing this, so actually, it's okay. But actually, none of it's okay. Again, reflecting when abusers beg and promise to change, and maybe they might do for a short period of time. So the abused person starts to believe, starts to think, oh, okay, this is okay. This sort of behaviour is actually called hoovering.
Okay, I don't think I've ever heard of that term, actually. What does that actually mean?
Yeah, this is when abusers hoover back. Imagine like suck you back in with love bombing and a mask again, of being all loving, and it's all a pretense.
Right.
Because really what they're doing is that control is coming back, isn't it? I want to control this person, right? So now I'm going to get them back. How can I do that? And that's the objective. It isn't the fact that they want you as a person. It's about their control. And it's all a pretense. Like I said, I believed everything he said. I believed that my partner would be the last person to lie to me. And boy, was I naive. Little did I know for nearly all of my marriage that I was living a lie.
Gosh, still am. I think you're probably the strongest person I know,
Oh,
because that's a lot to go through and to come out, my heart just goes out to how strong you are.
um, let's go on now and talk about something lighter. Oh, the in-law.
So my earliest memory, I think, of the in-laws was when I was sitting in the car with my two sister-in-laws. And I remember distinctly being told then, you're never going to belong in the family. And sitting there, I thought, it's a bit odd and a little hurtful, but it was true throughout all the years. They were nice to me, and then they would just flip, and start being quite argumentative. I think a lot of it was because I was just very different. They hadn't broken out of their own cultures, basically. They always had partners that were from other Caribbean islands like Jamaica, and that was it.
Yeah.
There wasn't any other kind of diversity. So it was quite tight knit. So I stood out, not just aesthetically, but also my sense of humour was a little dry. I was a little sarcastic, maybe. And, perspective of life was just very different as well. And I think, that can really rub on some people if they're not used to. Because remember, if you're from a tight knit family and everybody thinks the same way as you have one perspective of life and one way of thinking. Hands up. I've got to take some accountability. Sometimes my sarcasm and my sense of humour will cause some trouble, if I'm completely honest with you. My husband will find it funny, and brother-in-law will find it funny, but that was about it. Nobody else found it that funny. And when you're younger, when someone says something, I used to take the bait on everything. So when someone said, oh, what do you think? I would be quick to tell you the truth. And we all know, through maturity and age, truth is never a good thing. Like, you don't dish out the truth because people do not like it. And we're telling the truth kind of hurt. I think it was hurtful for them and they didn't know how to react. That definitely didn't go in my favour, if I'm honest. Also, through the years, I think my older sister-in-law, she kind of acted like a bit the mum in the whole situation. And three's never good in any crowd. It's just like never goes. And over time, she kind of sort of referred to me as a third person to my husband, like your wife.
Wow.
And I found that hurtful. Again, being on the outside, where for a long time, every year, 2-3 times a year, we would go to family events, mainly to support my husband. And I enjoyed it, no lie, I would have a laugh and everything. But there would be times that it would affect me. And again, I don't know whether it was proof that I was a good person and hey, I'm fun to be with. It was always that sense of belonging that I wanted. So I came from a family who ostracized me, didn't have that sense of belonging, thought I married into a family where I had a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
They kind of more or less rejected me, so I didn't have that sense of belonging. So that was hurtful. And they never really embraced my kids either. And as everyone knows, like your kids are your world.
Yeah.
Anyone that doesn't embrace them 100%, it's like 1,000 knife wounds to your heart. So it wasn't a great experience. I mean, there's some good memories, I have a lot of, but I think I couldn't overlook all the good times with a lot of the bad times again through my own thoughts in terms of how I interpreted it, internalized it. We all know with mental health, it's all about yourself in terms of how that becomes a narrative.
Yeah.
Me not belonging then became a big narrative in my head, which affected me basically.
That must have had such an emotional toll on you. And like you say, speaking the truth, we can speak the truth to people that we trust, but other people don't always like it, like you say. It sounds like you were kept out of the family box and as an outsider again. And that's so similar for me too with the in-laws. I was always made to feel like the outsider and not accepted. First, the in-laws would come round the house unannounced at any time. And this was really alien to me. And it wasn't really respecting my privacy or time, that my time might be valuable or anything like that. It was just an expectation that was placed. And they pretended to be nice when they needed to show the world that everything was tickety. Show up at events and weddings as a well put together family. Oh, look at that family. Aren't they all so good together? And far from the truth behind the scenes. Like, I have to admit, I tried to please this family, doing things that were asked of me, compromising myself, my time, my energy, trying to do the right thing. You know, I did have that always trying to please everyone else first mindset and forgot about what I needed and wanted as well. Certain incidents like weddings, I used to absolutely dread. Would go with the whole family and the husband would like drink and I would end up having to drive back in a sari and heels and kids in the back with this pisshead sitting next to me snoring away or singing Jamkila songs really loudly. Gosh, I know. And it actually made me feel scared for myself and my children. And also I was like, don't you dare vomit in the car. And that drunk, but he'd still want to be dropped off at the pub when we got back and come home hardly able to walk and in aggressive rage and anger towards me. But I told my father-in-law, who said, well, I won't take him to weddings with me anymore. I did explain how scared he made me and the grandchildren when he got drunk. And he just point blank refused to talk to him about his drinking, saying that it would ruin his relationship with his son. You know that saying, blood is thicker than water. He just was more worried about himself than thinking about his grandchildren or daughter-in-law.
God, it's just the craziest thing I've ever heard. So on one hand, you have like this abusive husband.
Yeah.
And then you have this father who doesn't want to he just wants to pretend that nothing's wrong.
Yeah. Hiding it and condoning the behaviour in a way, isn't it? And we talk about hidden messages sometimes are being placed in a box, but actually I was outright told by some of the family members I was an outsider. And the hubby just sat there and said nothing. His aunt, who was married into the family, his brother's wife, they're all married into the family. And I actually said, does that mean that they're outsiders too then? There was silence. So literally by omission, that answered my question. No, they weren't. It was only me that was being considered the outsider because I had different views. They thought I was quite westernized in my thinking compared to them. They didn't like that. They didn't like the way that I did things, how I wanted to bring up my children. They didn't like the fact that I had bought a house to live and not in an extended family home, so many things. And there was a lot of resentment around that. And my brother-in-law would come round and try and persuade my husband to go out on benders with him. Interestingly, when he got married and his wife was there, he didn't go out on benders anymore and spent their evenings with his wife. So people judge and do things when they're not walking in the same shoes. But when they do, they end up having empathy and more understanding.
So in the most bizarre way, your relationship provided him with tools on how not to be in a marriage. So in a strange way, you gave him a lifeline in terms of like, this is how you make a good marriage.
Yeah.
If you don't do X, Y, Z.
Yeah. Remember, I was married to this for nearly 2 decades.
Honestly, again, the strongest woman I know. So let's talk about our own family relationships. So let me start with mine. Yeah. So mine was emotional blackmail. I was like emotionally trying to please my family. So that's where all my hurt came from. And I absorbed quite a lot of that emotional blackmail, if I'm honest. So, you know, I felt, even though I had my husband who was very loving, I had the children, you know, I had like a really good setup, but I still felt isolated because I still wanted to belong to my mum and my sisters. You know, stupid as it sounds, I would have the perfect family because they would have aunties and they would have grandparents. You know, and it was just crazy how I wanted to build this perfect family, extended family, basically.
Yeah, I hear you. You were trying to fulfill that underlying need of belonging.
Yeah, 100%. And I know. And I think with certain generations of mothers, they do love that constant criticism and the constant snippets of hurt. And I think my mum kept giving that to me constantly. You know, it was never good enough, or the marriage was never good enough, or he was never good enough, or my life was never good enough. It was just like made up stories. In that respect. So, you know, so feeling those negative stories early on in the relationship and throughout didn't really help. But, I've now learned to set boundaries. I never knew what boundaries were. I've now learned to set boundaries and I apply that to myself now. So I don't go back to all those emotional punches.
Yeah.
And that's what I was constantly doing. I was just going back for a punching bag and get those punches all the time. And the reason I probably did that, looking back, was because I wanted my kids to have the love of an extended family. And they did give it to them. They were very, very good to them. And I didn't want to jeopardize them. For me, they weren't great to me, but they were great for the kids. And I always felt until they got to a certain age, they would make their own judgment, not because of anything I say to them, but they would make their own judgment whether they would want to go back or have as much contact as they wanted. I think to have additional love from other people apart from your direct family for children is really important for me personally. I kind of sacrificed myself just for my kids to get that love.
That makes me so sad to hear that you never got the same love that you saw your children get from your family.
Yeah, it was. But I think at the time, I just kind of sort of think, as long as my kids getting the love, that was enough for me.
Yeah.
But not realizing the impact of those criticisms that emotional abuse would actually have on me.
Yeah.
Anyway, because it just seeps in, doesn't it? It seeps in. And at some point, it does get to you. So I needed to understand why I went through so many years of not breaking free from that. So now, I've learned to break my own mental cycle and accept them. So again, it goes back to, it's not them. It's more about how I react and understanding, why do I react in that same way? Why do I absorb it? Why do I create this narrative? Why do I still feel I have to go there? So, for me, it's accepting for who they are. I can't change them. You can't change people. And this is the biggest thing. You cannot change people. You cannot get them to love you whatsoever. That's not going to happen. But what you can do is start in understanding how you love yourself more. And that in turn has made that need for belonging less.
Wowsy. That takes a lot of strength, self-reflection, hard work to change how we think about really very ingrained programming in our minds.
Yeah, and I've sort of felt like me leaving them, basically leaving that box. In a way, I can sort of felt that maybe that abandonment they felt for me leaving at 18. Remember, I was like the mum to my siblings for a long time, and that their hurt was then projected on me and not necessarily my marriage.
And it's good to be able to reflect and think about it outside of ourselves, other people's reactions, and be curious about why they say certain things as well. Right, deep breath. Another family box that you were outside of. And I'm so glad that you have your own family box, which provided you with the love and the strength to get through this. And so my experience was a bit different. My family, when they knew what was happening, really supported me when I was going through the breakups. They supported me when I went back the first couple of times. And then they were there when I was most broken after the marriage ended. And despite having that continued turbulent relationship in the older years with my dad, he and all the rest of my family always wanted the best for me and looked out for me.
So that's beautiful. That's exactly what families do.
Don't get me wrong, I still had a very difficult relationship with my father. We argued every time I saw him. And I think, again, this was because of how I was thinking. I was angry, so angry with him for so many things, and felt resentment and blamed him for what had happened in my life due to his constraints, and still fought against his control when I came home. It felt like I'd jumped from one box in my marriage into another one at the time. And yeah, I blamed him and wasn't in a place to really reflect on, actually, I made certain decisions based on his box. So I have to take responsibility for that. But I wasn't in a position to do it then. For me, it felt like there was no escape. But when I was with my children, they saved me. They gave me strength and were my sanity. They were my sunshine in my life.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
It is so beautiful.
Thank you. And let's talk about, what's the effects and the aftermath of all of these relationships that we've had to go through and been through.
Yeah. And I think it affects mental health quite a bit, to be fair. And it in turn affects a relationship because you allow those negative thoughts and external people to really chip at you. So, even if you have a secure relationship, which I felt we had, I began to focus on the wrong things. I began to focus on those negative things, negative feeds. I cried divorce 3 times. I'm not so sure I would have done if I didn't actually have those negative thoughts. Probably would have called divorce twice. All those negative things, they can literally break you. And if you think about it, my whole thing was just this stupid need for belonging. And it started with that. And it carried all the way through and it affected my relationship. I was just seeking for my mum to say she was proud of me, like her approval.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell? Why would I need one woman to tell me that she was happy with the choice that I made when I neglected so many times and how proud I was? Like, think of myself as that younger 9-year-old, in the good Muslim girl at the time, living that controlled, restrictive life to a certain degree, and how I broke out of that box, and how I found my freedom and how proud I was to the life I live now. But I ignored my own validations. It never felt good enough.
Yeah.
So it's only now that I've learned that the only affirmation is the one that comes from within. So I always have this analogy that I always use myself, that if I had an out-of-body experience, would I like me? And honestly, every time I'm like, yeah, oh my God, I would love you. So they oh,
I like that so much.
no, honestly, I would go on to name qualities. I would love you if you were my wife because you are so funny, you're so witty, you're so kind. I would love you as a mother for X, Y realization. I would love you for my friend. I would love you for my sister. I would love you for if you were my daughter. I would love you. And that should have been enough.
That's so beautiful to have such a great mindset and that self-belief. Love this. How do we heal?
Well, to me, I think, how we heal is really taking into consideration what do we have? So my box ultimately is my husband and my kids. They should only be my validation. I didn't need to persuade others to approve me, It was enough. It was enough what I had, and to hell with them. So for me, like, it is boundaries. It comes back to this boundaries thing, which I never knew it ever existed. So I've learned to put them in place and it helps so much. And I've learned that you can't force people, even family, to like you. It's just not going to happen. They're just people. In my head, I had this fairy tale made up Brady Bunch family with grandparents, aunts, and cousins who all loved each other. That ain't true.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. It didn't exist. I was forcing something that just did not exist. And I had to move on. So belonging was something that clouded my judgment for so many years. And I carried the weight of it for so long. I recognized that I could not belong to myself first and foremost, and to my family. And that was my unconditional love, which I yearned for so many years. The little girl, I wanted that unconditional love. I just wanted more. I was greedy. I wanted the cake and cherry on top. I wanted more than cherry. I wanted like the cherry tree. I agree with life anyway.
Like I said, I left twice and the third time for good after decades of me thinking I was a problem and I was doing something wrong. So feeling like a bad person for fighting for what I stood for, my values of love, kindness, loyalty, not wanting to give up and trying to do the best for my children. Bottom line, I didn't love myself enough to fight for me. And I was brought up thinking that it's all about pleasing other people and putting yourself second. That's the sort of ingrained way that I was brought up in childhood. And that's what's meant to be good and kind. That's what kind people do. That's what good people do. And when I left for good, looking back, I don't actually recognize who I'd become. I was so unsure of who I was and really doubted myself as I'd been living to please the husband and his family. I'd given everything of myself and they just kept on taking it. And I was literally a shell of the person. When I now look back at the photos of me then, I don't actually recognize myself. How downtrodden, tired, worn out, and so sad eyes that I had as a person then. And healing for me, I undertook a lot of counselling to help me understand and learn who I was again, who I am. And I've done a lot of work around attachment styles and how this shows up in our behaviours. And that's all based on subconscious triggers. And I also looked at the impact of childhood trauma and what we all go through in one way or another. And also shadow work, which is about those oppressed emotions and fears. This has really helped me to own my healing and growth. And like you say, set healthy boundaries. I've always had that inner strength, and my children have given me strength as well. And when I was actually living on my own, I didn't feel like I was living on eggshells. I actually felt I was able to breathe, as were my children. It was like a rediscovery of who I am and what I wanted instead of fulfilling everybody else's needs. I stopped apologizing for being me, and I remembered my crown and I straightened it up. But I still fall into habits sometimes. It is learning all our lives, isn't it? And there's still times where I still want to please family or friends over my own needs. And now I have to reflect really carefully. And I'm curious about why I do things and why other people may say or act or do things in a particular way. And I think most importantly, I listen and trust my gut instincts. I don't doubt myself anymore. I think it's really important to let go of anger and blaming everyone for what happened to me and understand myself better through healing work. That's not saying the abusive behavior, the emotional abuse is okay. I'm not saying that that is the case. What I am saying is that actually to move on, I need to be understanding myself better, to find my peace, to practice gratitude in what I've got and put one foot in front of the other each day. And that over time has lessened that pain. It wasn't easy. And there were some times when I went backwards, but each time I just kept on going. And slowly there were better days than worse. And I'm still healing and growing every day and learning more.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. It really is.
Thank you. I think we're now at the stage where we need to take some reflection. So Z, what advice would you give to your younger self at this stage of your life?
Yeah, I think, again, it comes back to culture. Regardless of that, I've tried to break away from it, is so strong. That always wanting to belong to that family. If you don't have that family connection, then you can't be a good person, So it's hard to get away from the notion of how important family is, regardless of how they treat and make you feel. So the advice I would give to myself is remind yourself why you made that change. Remind yourself of the love and of the love that you have, and don't let others try to taint it or break it, because they will. And give yourself room to reflect on a daily basis of what you have, and use that as a strength to move forward, pushing aside the noise. Your journey will be immensely challenging, but you need to showcase your love to your own partner and to your own family, because that's where the energy is, right? You need to navigate them to change the course of culture. So, I know full well my children are free from any culture. I've given them that freedom. They're free of any ingrained traditions where the self is secondary. And trust me, you're never secondary, ever. You are the prime reason you're here to create that change for you and for future generations. So you've got to hold your head up. You've got to put your shoulders back and you break out a smile as you need to move forward.
That's beautiful advice.
Yeah. You've got to be strong, man. You're going to wear that crown and you're going to wear that crown.
You're straight in there with jewels and bling bling.
Totally. And you, Em?
Well, this has been a very serious episode, hasn't it? And a very serious message. I wish someone had told me in my 20s to really take time to work on myself and understand myself, to look at my attachment style, whether it be anxious or avoidant, and really understand what experiences from my childhood have subconsciously affected how I react in the present relationships, and what are those past traumas and triggers. Because we all have experiences how we've been raised, and without us knowing the impact on how we think of ourselves and how we react to others, we can then think about what we want to do going forward with better awareness when we have an understanding of our attachment style. Like childhood traumas subconsciously influence, not always the sort of person that we might seek as partners, and that can be based on the feelings and emotions that are evoked that we feel familiar from those in our childhood. But also we can subconsciously, again, be attracted to partners unknowingly as adults, because what we're trying to do is to try and put right those childhood wounds, what we would have wanted to do when we were a child, and try and put that right as our older selves. And this can also subconsciously continue that generational trauma. And that's passed down from generation to generation. By actually understanding ourselves, we can break it. When we come from a place of not having our own cup full, we try to chase and attach to people to fill it. And our boundaries are low because we need someone to fill that cup for us. We're seeking validation. We're seeking for someone to confirm our self-worth and to affirm us that we are good, we are loved, we are enough. And we internalize everything if we do this. And we keep ourselves in that box. But when we come from a secure or healed place, our cup is full. So we have a strong sense of self and strong boundaries to protect our own self-worth. We have that self-love. When we're like that, we can then meet people not from a place of need or desperation, but because we have a desire to make connections, and we come from a peaceful place, which can actually add extra to our lives, like that cherry or cherry tree, like you were saying. But we've got to make sure that we fill our own cup first and be comfortable and love who we are fully, and to know what our fears and our triggers are, which helps us going forward. Because when we have that secure sense of self, they can really start being curious about why someone or why we may say or act in a certain way, and not internalize it as childhood wounds and beat yourself up about it, but really reflect and analyze objectively and learn from it and make rational decisions about other people and yourself. It is strong to say, I don't accept and tolerate this type of behavior or this comment or this action, and break out of that box. It is about setting boundaries to protect yourself. And if it's hard to do the work yourself, sometimes, and I've done this, it's better to seek help. I would say that to my younger self. Seek counselling, seek coaching. And I've done this a number of times as I've got older and have been through trauma and abuse. But I wish I'd done it when I was younger, and it would have helped me to grow. And it has helped me to grow now and to heal so much. I could only do it when I was open and ready for it. So it is hard sometimes at the start. It's not always easy, because self-reflection means letting go and changing our thought processes and really trusting the process. But it definitely helped me one step at a time. And to remember, when you're feeling at your lowest, and you're in a dark place, that you are the only one that can lift yourself up. And it is about your own mindset, and it's about overcoming that pain and hurt one step at a time to rise up again. It's about knowing that it's not going to happen overnight, and it can seem overwhelming, but one step at a time is good. So be kind and loving to yourself. Thanks for listening today. We would love it if you could click the subscribe button, add your comments, and share with as many people as you feel would enjoy our discussions and stories.
We would so love to hear your stories. So email us anonymously or with your first name, any stories about being in the box or getting out of that box. Our email is in the link below.
Can't wait for you to join us next time, where we'll be discussing the parenting box and pregnancy. What happened? Were there more boxes? Join us to find out.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait again for the next episode.
We have so much to share.